if we hit a point where we need that, but please, panelists jump in. I know Meredith is, I think, moderating the chat, so feel free to post things there too if you're watching. And yeah, and so I just wanted to get started with thinking about what's already been happening in our classrooms. And I thank Bill for helping me paraphrase my initial questions. But as white teachers, what do we, I guess, already perceive our schools are doing to create a safe space for our Black students? Are they doing that? Do we have, maybe within our classrooms and as a bigger organization in our school, in our counties, in our districts, how has that been happening already for anyone? Don't all answer at once.
So I can start on that. So thankfully, as part of my role as my school's equity and excellence coordinator, I'm in those conversations with our administrators and counselors about what we are actively doing to intentionally create safe classrooms and a safe school, safe and welcoming school for all of our students of color. While my school is majority white, our demographics are shifting in the last couple of years, thankfully. We've had a large increase of our Latino and Asian student population, especially. So we have a few different affinity groups for our students. So personally, I've run a student group, boys mentoring group that's about 90-ish% students of color. All of our groups are open to anyone, but when myself and some of the other staff that help coordinate and run them, we're actively trying to recruit our students of color. A lot of these started years ago, mostly as a way for a lot of our kids who didn't feel like they belonged at our school or even in the county sometimes, a place to really fit in and to just kind of let their guard down, not have to worry about any outside anything, and just kind of have that space to call their own. So we have a lot of different groups out there at our school for a lot of different groups. So we have a boys of color mentoring group, a girls of color mentoring group, a specific Latina girls group that is mostly for our EL students. Mostly as a place for them to really kind of fit in and get along and feel like they're an active part of and welcomed and valued part of our school. And a few years ago, we started our Gender Sexuality Alliance that just exploded with membership, which has been really great to see. We've also started, sadly, right before we all went out for quarantine, we started a student equity team, which consisted of myself, one of our assistant principals, a counselor, and we kind of recruited from our different affinity groups and from a few other students that we have close relationships with to really kind of let them have a direct impact on school. A lot of that part started as a response to some incidents that happened at the school this year. But the goal is moving forward, not only to deal with that issue, but to try to put in place different things and different initiatives to prevent a lot of future incidents.
To tag along with what Eric was saying, my school is also in the process of starting the student equity team, and kind of got cut short by COVID. But we've really, I'm also at a middle school, we do some of the same similar things of groups for students with, like-minded teachers and adults in the building. But something that was new this year that I thought was really cool was a book club that was hosted. The students read one of the Elizabeth Acevedo books, and then they actually got to meet her when they went to high school. So as terms of like the books that kids are reading and the opportunities that they have, I think that at least at my school, our administration and our teachers have really been dedicated to bringing like diverse voices into their classrooms, through what students are reading and the resources that they have. And I think that's been really, really good.
It's interesting, Mary, when you mentioned a book club and Christy had a knowing look, because Christy and I teach at the same school, you were speaking to a student book club, a book club for students, is that correct? And
Yeah.
my brain went to what we've been doing at our school, which is facilitating a teacher book club. Because I think as we think about this, we are the ones, you had said like-minded teachers, right? We are the ones who are here for this conversation, and we're the ones that have at least a mindfulness to engage in this work, right? And I imagine that at all of our schools, there's a range of perspective, and it's about making sure that firstly, that we as a staff community are all on this same page, or at least willing to engage in the conversation. So that's a long way of saying that as a staff, we've had, and not to any, they're wonderful staff members who've put forward, we read together How to Be an Anti-Racist by Dr. Kendi. And so for those who wish to participate in the conversation in the book club, we've had courageous conversations and just sort of doing this work to be sure that the staff of the building is committed to this important work for our students first.
And I can chime in here. It's really interesting for me kind of listening to what's going on in Arlington. The district that I'm in is a bit further west, and different population, different size, totally different size. I hesitate to say different needs, but definitely experiencing different things. My district is growing exponentially every year. The school I'm at just opened, I think 5 years ago. That's when I entered the county. The county got a new superintendent that year, and the previous superintendent had been around for, I don't know, like 15 or 20 years. So I think that kind of speaks to like, the new superintendent is really working to change the culture in the district. And of course, there's mixed responses to that across the county. And, you know, we have a long way to go, but I do think that there's a lot happening that's positive. We have not quite gotten to the point of like staff book clubs, though that's something that I think would be awesome to do. And I've kind of talked about briefly. I've been out over the past 3 years. I've had 2 children, and so it's kind of, you know, I've kind of been in and out of the school year, but I think that's something that a lot of our staff would be interested in, particularly at my school. But my school, even in particular, has been in flux. We have had staff cuts the past 2 years, and this year they were kind of a surprise cut because another new high school is opening, and the way they drew the lines just ended up, that's how it worked out. And so there's been a lot of kind of roiling and trouble, even just getting our feet on the ground in some regards. And so I hope that a lot of these current event issues can start to take center stage once we get back. But of course, you know, now we don't even really know what the fall is going to look like. But our superintendent did put out, I have it pulled up on my other screen here. At the beginning of this past school year, he put out an equity statement, which was really a big deal. He said specifically in the equity statement, the words white supremacy and systemic racism, which for my county was pretty big. So I'm very fortunate that at the school that I'm at in my English department, we have a lot of like-minded people. And so we were all super supportive of this. And I think the majority of people across the county are supportive of it, but there is a long way to go. And so I really hope out of this conversation tonight that I'm able to get some ideas to carry back with me to help get the ball rolling out where I am.
Well, Sara, that's a nice transition to thinking about things like what is our role, both, you know, within our classroom, and what can we do with our curriculum for our students? What kind of resources can we bring in? I watched another one of these classroom culture sessions, and an educator brought up, you know, what we put in front of our students is what they take away. And as teachers, it's our power is in how we, you know, pick what we give them. So there's that within our classroom, and you know, if it sounds like most of us are lucky enough to work in environments where we are supported in bringing in this stuff from our administrations, but lots of people aren't, and there are places where that doesn't happen. So I guess it's thinking about like, what can we control and how can we also help move the larger system other ways. I don't know if people have ideas about that. It's a hard.
Yeah.
As I've been doing my own reading this summer, and even before this summer is a weekend. Summer began in March, right? So as I've been doing this my own reading and reflection, throughout it, I feel like I'm putting on different, trying to put on different goggles, if you will. Putting on the goggles of my conservative aunt, and how would she rebut this, right? And what would my response and reaction be to her? Putting on my own goggles, of course, firstly, of like my own lived experience. And then putting on the goggles of my students of color as they interact with me and as they come into my classroom, and what do they feel and what do they see and what do they experience with me as a teacher, right? Our very wise principal a couple of years ago made a very thoughtful statement, which was, if you look around at many of our classrooms, you see the LGBT plus safe space sticker that's affixed to many classrooms. And so for the gay student, for the gay teacher, I felt very affirmed, very accepted in our school building. But then if you go from classroom to classroom, can you say the same is true about Black Lives Matter statements in each classroom? And how does that project to our students of color? And so I continue to think about, again, through the goggles of my students of color, and how do they, when they enter my room, how do they know that this is a place, is a space that they can feel safe and supported and loved, right? And what do they get from me on a daily basis that at least has an acknowledgement of them? And so then, Christy, you also brought us to the resources, and I'm a chorus teacher, so for me, I'm going to get very into my own domain, and hopefully it's transferable to all of yours. But for me, I'm thoughtful of including music and repertoire that represents different perspectives, different cultures, right? And does so in a very authentic, respectful way. You may, or if you're a chorus person, you know that for decades it has been, we're going to add an African-American spiritual at the end of the concert because it just makes everyone feel good. Well, that's just not enough, right? And that is not a authentic use of a really important music. So I'm thoughtful of being sure that my students of color see themselves in the music, in the perspective, in an authentic way. And I'm sure in each of our in our domains that we can find the ways that it's not tokenized, or it's not just put in there in the month of February, but that all of these perspectives are important parts of our curriculum.
I really liked what you said, Bill, about like students feeling welcome, and like you saw, where's the Black Lives Matter stickers, on the door to make Black students feel welcomed in the building. And I think that, I know I opened myself up at the end of the year to do a really honest kind of feedback survey with my students, because we talk a lot about like impact over intention, or, we didn't intend our statements, but this is how it landed with the students. So I just kind of wanted to check up on, do my students feel that I care about them, that I want them to be successful? And so I think that if I worked in a building where administration wasn't taking these things seriously, or I felt like I was, my progressive voice was kind of in the minority, I would really encourage other teachers, and I would really encourage the administration to have a courageous conversation with students. Like they want to share their point of view, they want to share their voices, they want to suggest books or authors that they want to read, or pieces of music that they want to sing. So I think that we really just, I don't know, we see ourselves a lot as like the gatekeepers to education. Like we're, it all has to come from us. We have, we hold the power, and I think it's hard to give that up because that's what we're accustomed to. But I think the more we give that up and the more that we listen to, to our students, it's going to be a much better beneficial situation for them and us too.
Just to build up something Bill said that really caught me, that authentic aspect of it. to where it's not just like a checklist or creating a tokenism type environment for our students of color, for all of our diverse students. You know, I remember sitting as an elementary school and middle school student at, you know, the holiday chorus concert, and as like the one Jewish kid in the room, you know, they would do some like dreidel, dreidel, dreidel nonsense, and it was always just so forced. And you know, we teach kids who are experts at sniffing out BS and sniffing that out. And if it's not authentic, they're going to see right through it. So having that as like an intentional part, an authentic part of the curriculum, whether it's a concert or, you know, history content, anything really. It all comes back to, is there an authentic interest on the teacher's part? Is there authentic care and sincere care?
I really appreciate everything that all of you have said. And something that I'm sitting here thinking is like, you know, I really work hard every summer, not necessarily like sitting down at a notebook every day, but it's constantly mulling through in my mind. Like, what am I going to do those first few days, that first week, to build that authenticity, to show my students that I do care, that they are welcome, you know, all that fun stuff. Well, important stuff that hopefully becomes fun. But my fear this year is, how do you do that virtually? And I know that's not something that necessarily there's an answer to right now, but I worry that with these hybrid plans being pushed, that a lot of teachers aren't going to be thinking about that. And so I worry about how will, like, the super active kids, the super interested in learning kids are going to, you know, when I think it's safe to say when we end up online, they are going to do fine, right? But like, what about those other students? And we're not, even if we are there for a week, even if we're there for a month, you don't necessarily, that's not enough time to build that authentic relationship. So how virtually, just to kind of, I don't know, think about it, and I guess put my fear out there. I don't think I'm alone in that fear. How do you build that virtually? Yeah. What do you do? Like, I can't put the sticker, or maybe I can, I don't know, maybe I post that in Google Classroom, like, I love you all. I don't know, not all, but you know, but what do you do?
You know,
oh, go ahead, Bill.
Chris, I'm thoughtful of our important work as teachers is to see and to acknowledge and to love the uniquely beautiful individuals that our students are, right? And so whatever way we can find for them to share that piece of their story with us, I think is perhaps our first step in building those authentic relationships. You know, as far as I'm concerned, when the beginning of the school year hits us, no matter what we're asked to do, there's going to be a whole lot of work that's done on forging relationships in this inauthentic relationship building kind of way, a whole lot of work on figuring out technology and how we're going to collectively use it, right? And maybe by December we'll get to content, we'll see. But all of that preliminary work of relationship building and explore, I in some respects see this as a powerful opportunity for us to perhaps learn a little bit more about our unique individuals that we call students in this way.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I agree, Bill, with what you said. And I think, and definitely have all those same concerns. And I think, you know, we're forming these relationships in a more difficult time. And we're also doing it when our students, you know, as we're all aware, and I know those of us in the same district, we've been doing this trauma-based learning too, because our students, regardless of their background, we're all as a nation experiencing a trauma now with COVID. And so there's that aspect that they're coming back to school with. And then there's many of them experiencing real life trauma as, you know, Black students, as brown students, with the heightened attention to, you know, all these racist murders happening in our country. And, you know, I think I can say here, since we're all in this conversation, that, you know, that our administration has normalized white supremacy, really. And so we're welcoming these students in what's the word I'm looking for? Unusual, that's not the word I want, but different ways. And we do, I think, I like that Bill and Mary and all of you have brought up, like, listening to them and getting our students' perspective. I think it's really powerful. And I guess just realizing I'm trying to realize, like, you know, students who haven't had me before and I ask them to write something, even if it's not graded, even if it's low stakes, they may not open up to me right away, right? And that's true in the classroom or not, but trying to create the space that they know they can, I guess, is hard. And also that they know they can challenge us too, I think is important. I know, Mary, you kind of mentioned the gatekeeper thing, and I think about that a lot, that I very much want to more intentionally let students know they can challenge me, I guess, in how I'm teaching or what I'm teaching, and that their voice really matters in that too.
I think that goes a long way to building relationships. I mean, if a student knows that you are learning just as much from them as they are from you, I mean, it's reciprocal. And I think that is that you're respecting them, they're going to respect you. Like it's really building a strong bond.
I know this has been a source of anxiety, or an area of anxiety for me, because as an equity and excellence coordinator, as a special ed English reading teacher who I typically work with a lot of our kids with emotional behavioral issues. So that relationship is key if I'm going to get them to do anything. And as someone who's very much not tech savvy, I'm very anxious about how this is going to work in the fall, for, meeting a whole new crop of students and trying to get them to at least trust me enough to be a little bit vulnerable. I think letting them know that, I'm figuring my way through this too, that we're all experiencing some of the same anxieties and frustrations with quarantine, with COVID, with everything else, and kind of sharing that vulnerability kind of levels the playing field a lot. We're not just these, perfect teacher know-it-all people, that we're dealing with some of the same struggles right now.
For sure.
But yeah, I agree. I'm in the middle of reading for white folks who teach in the hood, and the rest of y'all too. And the very beginning of the book, he kind of starts off with that. We've all learned, the whole don't smile until after Thanksgiving kind of mentality. I remember being told that, my first inner city teaching job was very much like, you need to be tough, get rid of your sweet voice, like blah, blah, blah. And I built all this time trying to put up like a wall between me and my students that I'm now 10 years later learning was not really very helpful at all. And sort of, they were never going to work with me or work for me if I was kind of standing in front of them as like this big, scary creature, for lack of a better word. So it's very strange, because I feel like so many of us were kind of taught that way, and that's how our teachers appeared to us when we were kids too. Like, remember seeing somebody at the grocery store and you're like, whoa, they buy milk? Like it was, so I think just tearing down that wall and, humanizing yourself as somebody who goes through some of the same things, who has empathy, is really, really valuable.
Yeah, I totally agree, Mary. And it is like a learning process, because I agree. I had a similar experience when I started teaching too. And it's like, you must be this stoic thing. I dress differently to make myself look older, all of those things. With all of this, I'm also wondering, it sounds like we have a lot of ideas that will hopefully help us build these relationships. And then I guess I'm now going back in my head to what we can do with our colleagues, like Bill mentioned from the beginning, and to help guide them, maybe get them on board in places where they might not be, or at least, and knowing that some, are going to have different perspectives, and how do we form those relationships with them too, so that, because I think, it's important for our students in our classrooms to know they have a safe place, but they also don't want to go across the hall and think like that is, they shut down in that class and they're failing that class, but more because of like the relationship. I don't know if I'm articulating myself well, but I guess I'm thinking, what resources do we already have? Can we help create with colleagues, you know, in our own spaces and colleagues we all know teachers in other states and other counties. How can we help support that work? Yeah.
So one of the things that I always try to work on in my role as an equity coordinator is, you know, yeah, my room is a safe, my office, my classroom are safe spaces for our students of color, but if I'm sending them back out into an unsafe school or into unsafe classrooms, long-term, you know, what am I really accomplishing? I think a lot of that does have to come from the school leadership and from admin, because, you know, if the principal and admin establish, you know, that a culture devoted and really devoted to equity and creating equitable schools and environments for our kids, you're going to hit walls and you're going to hit limitations. You know, you're going to have the staff who are very reluctant or resistant to anything. And if you're not going to have the backup from admin, or if they're not going to have like the will to really push this, it can only kind of go so far.
Yeah.
The best professional development that I feel like I've ever participated in are the ones that are born out of teachers saying, this is what we need to talk about and this is how we need to grow. And so I think we, to your point, Eric, that if the conversation is not already happening in your school, in our schools, then we teachers need to insist on it. We need to insist that these conversations are happening, and that we can't, I don't think we can come back from what our world, what our nation is currently reckoning with, and just say, all right, it's another school year, right? We have to insist that we need to engage in the conversation, and that we grow in discomfort as a staff, right? So that we can have these courageous conversations and breathe, so that we can then be a little bit better equipped to facilitate this for our students. But I think we as teachers need to be the ones that are putting forward these initiatives, these ideas, and insisting that they be a part of the conversation.
Absolutely.
Yeah, totally. And I guess I'm realizing too, as we're all talking, you know, we all work in not just schools that have different, you know, demographics of students, but also of teachers. And I know I love the school that I work at now, and I feel so grateful to work there. But I know I've talked with colleagues and even my principal in my like, you know, 10, 12 years of teaching. It is the whitest school I've worked at, both by students and staff. And so I also, you know, avoiding the tokenism of our students, it's also don't want to run to the couple of, you know, Black teachers and say, hey, like, you know, can you help me with this, and put all the burden on them. So I guess I'm also thinking about ways to allow those, if a teacher wants to lead something, you know, obviously to allow that, but also to respect that, like, that might not be, you know, you might be tired of doing that for your white friends, or you might, you know, we need to read and we need to find our resources elsewhere. So I guess I don't really have a question. I'm just thinking myself as well, as like, that's something I'm really trying to be cognizant of in my role at school too, is being there, but listening and not relying on everyone else to tell me, but also, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
I was kind of wondering, and I know, knowing the schools that Christy and Bill and Eric teach at, kind of like, they're pretty diverse. I don't know do you guys feel like you get pushback from other teachers or administrators? There would be people, because that's what,
Yes.
and I'm sure there's somebody in my building, I may not have run across them, or that they've come across in a strong way, but I've been talking to friends that I like went to college with and stuff, and it's like scary. Like I like things that other staff members are saying to them, and I feel in some ways like I'm sometimes preaching to the choir, and you know, what can we do when there really is like opposition is a little, you know, challenging to me.
I think, Eric, was it you who said, like, you have to have admin on board? I mean, if admin sets the tone, truly. And even, I guess, like slightly less than admin would be like at my school, we have department chairs. And so at least like if you have a department chair that's willing to kind of set that culture, that's helpful. But yeah, I mean, I think if you don't have admin, like,
good luck.
yeah.
You know, it's one of those things where, you know, as a, you know, even in my role as equity coordinator, I'm still, you know, same scale as, you know, any teacher in the building. So it's not like I have any authority to really, you know, tell somebody, no, you need to be doing this. You know, I suggest things, I push things in staff meetings and things like that. But for almost every initiative I've tried at my school, there's always pushback. Thankfully, I've always had a principal and other administrators at the school who support the work that I do and really push equity. But so like I know that, you know, if I say like, hey, I'm getting pushback from a few people on this, you know, I know I'm gonna be supported and I don't really need to worry about that. But you know, I hear these horror stories from friends of mine that teach all over the place too, where, you know, they'll actually get kind of, they'll get their hand slapped or something like that for even bringing up these types of topics.
Yeah, I mean, and that's a real issue, I know, for a lot of people. I think, you know, I'm thinking of my own limited experience all in this area, but when I taught in DC, we had a lot of turnover in my school there. And there were a few of us, though, that did create our own little kind of, we just went ahead and did it because there wasn't much oversight at that time. But, and we just created our own club for students to give them a voice in the school because they didn't really have one. But I will also say that it was really, really draining to work against people. And that were, you know, had power over my job, I guess. And not just because I didn't fear for my job ever, but it was just more of a, you can only bang your head against this wall so many times. But I do think, I don't want to be negative in that, but it's draining. So I think it's important that we, you know, find our like-minded people and form coalitions. I mean, it doesn't mean we're, you know, necessarily going and striking somewhere, but just, you know, having that community that does support you, because I do think in a lot of schools, you also hear stories of the people who don't speak up as much, but do support you and are a little afraid to use that voice. So yeah, I don't know if that, you know, that it's different in every place in the country. And I know for some people it's going to be a lot harder, but I think if you can find the community there to support you, it will help you get further along.
So I know in my school we have a staff equity team as well, where we meet ideally once a month, but in reality about once a quarter. And, you know, we're able to kind of come together as a group. You know, we have at least 2 administrators there every time. So we're able to kind of put our ideas in the ears of admin, you know, our ideas into ears of people that can actually enforce a lot of these things or require a lot of this stuff from staff. I will say one of the areas that I'm really hopeful about is, you know, after a lot of the newer protests or latest protests started up at the end of May, I know I've gotten emails from teachers asking to sign up for book clubs and book groups that I'm running at the school next year, and staff who were always that, you know, I know they support it, they do a lot of the work in their own classrooms, but kind of stop there, wanting to get more involved, or teachers that I've never heard from about any equity work wanting to do more, which,
Great.
you know, I'm thankfully, and I think across the county from talking with my colleagues, admin and our equity office are really trying to capitalize on that momentum right now and really use this to change the culture in a lot of our schools.
Yeah, I hope that, I think that there's an awakening within each of us of the work that we each need to do, and then that we need to do on a systemic level too. And it's on us to seize that awakening. And then to that end, I also think we're also called to not be complacent, right? And that's tricky because at the end of the day, these are jobs, right? But, and this is where I go back to some of the language that I was saying about insisting, of holding one another to professionally higher standards, to encourage the conversation, to bring people together informally even, and hey, let's have a conversation or have an informal book club. If administration is not there, but I think what we are charged to do is to not be complacent, because at the end of the day, our students see us, our students of color see us and need us, right? And if we are here in this conversation, then we are part of that wanting of change for them. The other thing, the other thought that came up, I think earlier is, many of us teach in Arlington County, and Arlington County just released the Your Voice Matters survey results, right? And I don't know if Loudoun County or other counties do these community surveys where they get data from students, staff, and parents about how is the school, your individual school, and how the county level school system is, what is your perspective on the schooling situation? And I read through our school's survey data, and it was very interesting, where I think we can pat ourselves on the back, but then we can look at the data and say, there is a significant population of students at my school who feel bullied or who do not feel safe. There's data proven student body who just does not feel what I think they ought to feel in my school or want to feel in my school. And so I think when we see the data to support this through these surveys, it encourages us all the more to say, we have work to do.
Yeah, that's a great point, Bill. Oh,
Hi,
sorry.
can I jump in and ask a quick question?
I was actually going to say, I just realized, and Meredith reminded me, it's 5:45, so I'd love if, some participants have questions, or if any of our Black educators who are watching have thoughts about this, because we certainly welcome that.
So I teach in NYC, which is definitely a different ball game when it comes to holding a teacher accountable and being, as much anti-racist as possible. What are your steps for day one? Because it looks like we're going to be, well, New York City, we're told we're going back in September. I don't know for Virginia if you guys are going to go actually back. What is your plan for day one when you walk into that classroom? What are we saying to our babies? How are we making sure that they know what we have planned for them? And how are you making sure you're incorporating that into your lessons, into your dialogue, and into your daily activities, period, with all the babies that we handle on an everyday basis? What are we doing specifically?
I think for me, I believe it will be important, again, whether we're in person or virtually, to just acknowledge what's been going on. I think someone was alluding to that earlier, Bill, maybe it was you. But just being able to put it out there, to acknowledge it and have it be in the classroom, because if it's not, then we end up kind of dancing around it. And that's when students start to just kind of tune us out, because why should they listen to us if we're pushing forward on curriculum, and that's not their world. Like, their world is what's happening now, and that's what we need to address. So while I wish I could say kind of exactly, but I really appreciate this question, because it will push me to think this over more and kind of firm up exactly how will I acknowledge what's going on. I don't know. I don't have an answer for that now, but that's definitely something that I need an answer to.
Yeah, 100%. That's an excellent question. And like Sara was saying, something that, I need to develop an answer for myself. And I agree that, I teach social studies, like everything that's happening is connected to something that is part of my curriculum. And from day one, just letting my kids know that I'm here for you. I care for you. I'm going to say your name properly. I'm going to call you by the name you want to be called and the pronoun that you want to use. And I support you. I think that for many of them, something as simple as knowing that I got your back, I agree with you, I'm here for you, can go a long way, because they're not really used to getting that from a lot of teachers.
I also appreciate, it was a challenge that you're offering us to say, when we go back, as teachers, what will we do that is more than just air? To say, here is how my classroom is aware and different and present. The beginning of my year often is building community and culture. As the chorus teacher, for me, it's about first creating that micro community that is our chorus, and then from there, we can make music together. And in my idea, that's kind of how all of our classrooms are, right? Our micro communities from which we want to then create educational environments. So for me, I am continuing to be thoughtful about how each person can share their diverse story, their unique story, and a little bit more about who they are and how that their history, their family, and how that's who is entering my room. All of that uniqueness of personality. And so I want all of my students, and I want myself, to know more about their stories, so that we can have greater appreciation for the uniqueness that each student is.
Yeah, this is a great question. And I also think, I agree that like building the community and sharing things, I think it's also important to share ourselves, like we said, but even, starting right off with, acknowledge, I mean, again, we said earlier, they're coming to us having experienced extra trauma right now, all of our students, and starting with that really. And if we don't have relationships, we might not get really deep into it, but just, I can share my own vulnerabilities and concerns with what's going on, both with, murders and with COVID-19 and everything else that we are experiencing in our country right now. And I don't know exactly how that will look yet, but as an English teacher, I am thankful that I, can easily bring in a lot of different perspectives and try to do that, but also some really current ones. And I think, we have so many resources available to us that it's a good way to start. I'm thinking to college when I had the first day of a class started, and it's in no way related to race, but it was powerful in that we started with the national anthem played by Jimi Hendrix at Woodstock, a video of it. It was a class on the 1960s and 70s. And just that alternative mode of starting class really set the tone. And so I think, for myself, and because I am in a place where I can do this without worry, like I might start with something a little more shocking than normal. Like, we're not in a normal situation, so why try to be normal, I guess.
Yeah, I was going to add.
And most of our students haven't been in a normal situation for a long time. So.
I was just going to add, like, just acknowledging the moment and acknowledging that we're teaching in an honestly insane time period. And, for history class, acknowledging that, look, you're living through what, the next generation is going to study in history class. And just acknowledging that, whether it's sharing your own kind of vulnerabilities on it, or just noting that this is crazy and we're going to get through this as best we can. But really creating that safe space as a place for the kids to want to come to. Whether it's just as an escape from all of that insanity, or just as a safe place where they can really process through it all with trusted adults, with peers that are in the same position.
I think for me too, as I'm listening to everyone else speak, I'm kind of already mulling this over. And I think something that I'd like to do that I haven't done as explicitly in the past as I probably should have been doing is naming my whiteness. I mean, I'm a white female. Like, I should have been doing this and I haven't been, but I think that maybe that will help my students. And it's not, I do bring in other voices and as an English teacher, other cultures and other backgrounds in the literature that we read and the things we write about, but it's always been kind of, I dance around the fact that I'm not that. And I think it's time, like, I think we're in a place where I need to say, like, I don't get it, but I want to we all have to learn this. Like, this experience that everyone else is going through is part of my life too. And I want to be able to help change things for other people, but I can't do that if I pretend that I'm, one with my students or whatever. I don't know, that all sounds really clunky, but I just want to be able to be very honest and, like Christy was saying, very vulnerable. And I think if I say, like, you know, they see I'm white, but to be able to say it is a totally different thing, which is why I've never said it before like that. It will be challenging, but I do, again, think that that will open up a dialogue and hopefully a level of trust to kind of start moving things forward.
So,
Yeah.
so typically, oh, sorry.
No, go
Typically,
ahead.
In my small group English classes and in my affinity groups, I'm typically the only, if not one of the only white people in the room. So I to kind of your point, I always, we point that out, and that for a lot of my kids, I don't know if lucky or fortunate is the right term for this, but for a lot of my students, I'm their only reference point for Judaism and what a Jewish person is. So I try to set it up as kind of, mutual sharing of different cultures. And, we do that in a way to try to find the commonalities. So I know, like, this year I had kids with all a wide variety of backgrounds, from like Southeast Asia to Northeast Africa to all over Latin America. And, they're in a room listening to 30-something-year-old white guy. So, we set it up as a place to really share those different perspectives. And thankfully, as an English teacher, as long as my kids are reading and writing, I can kind of change out what it is. And we kind of set it up so, each kid could find a way to relate to the curriculum, and that the curriculum represented all the diverse different backgrounds in the room.
Yeah, and I think I have the chat open, and I just see that I don't want to say your name wrong. Ives Nelly? I'm sorry if I'm saying that wrong.
It's Eve Nelly, but it's okay.
Nelly, I'm so sorry.
You call me Nelly.
Bringing up, we have to continue, and I think I can say that we're all on this page, but like to not shy away, to not get lost in this conversation. We talked about intentionality and those things, and it's also, I think we are people who I think are trying to do this work, but it can easily get lost in the school year. I know that some of us start to feel deadlines coming up, start to feel other things, and I think that this is we need to remember, and that this is more important than a lot of those things, and it will help us, create a safe space for our students, a place where they can learn and be more successful and better for them, which is ultimately what we want, right? We want them to be able to grow and succeed. And I think that's important to continue to keep talking about, and to not, I know for my part, I easily get caught up in, like, oh my God, now, the writing SOL is coming up. What do we do now? And just remembering, like, that's not what's important to their life, and that's not what's going to make an impact overall. Yeah. So I just think that's really important too.
Yeah, and I had said this earlier, that if we come back to a September that looks like, or an August that looks like every other August, or at least even curriculum-wise or initial lesson plans, I mean, it would be incredibly tone deaf. And then that, defeats the opportunity to forge a relationship. We're not even acknowledging perhaps what's most important in our students' hearts and minds. And so we do need to lean in with that, lean in with this conversation as we come back with our students, for sure.
Yeah. Are there other questions, maybe from any of the other observers, participants here, or ideas or resources? Or I know that I've only
I'll just say that as guiding along, their amount of resources found within this chat, this alone is, and so thank you for everyone who's offered up resources here, is super powerful.
Yeah. The only other thing I'm thinking of is, I know I see a lot in social media of posts, kind of bitter, maybe not bitter, I don't know, posts where people are saying, oh, I'm tired, I need to take a mental health break. And yes, we do need to all take care of ourselves, but we also need to recognize that many of our students and colleagues don't get to do that. And again, I think that's, you know, something to keep in mind, and to not just, you know, I'm not articulating myself well, but, you know, we may be tired. We haven't had the same experiences forever. And it's important for us to not only be uncomfortable, but to be challenged in that way too. That's the other kind of discomfort, I think, that we need to be cognizant of and push through and say, well, I am, but my kids, I went into this career for a reason. So that's
just being able to acknowledge the privilege of being able to take that break.
Yeah.
That, you know, a lot of people are not.
Yeah, you can't take that break if it's your life every day, or if it's what you look like, or how you present in the world. Yeah. I don't know. I know Meredith, we're at about 6 o'clock. I don't, do people have closing thoughts? There are a lot of great resources, and I really appreciate the feedback and I haven't followed the full chat, but I want to go back to it. I think I did see a comment that we'd be able to access it after this for those of you who haven't been able to follow it, because, you know, multitasking in Zoom can be very difficult.
So I just want to note, Eves, I love that statement. If you're not uncomfortable, you're not doing enough. You know, we're all teachers. We're all in this chat right now because, you know, we see that the system right now is not set up in the right way and not set up in the best way we can. And that, you know, if we're not uncomfortable, if we're not making our school or colleagues uncomfortable with these issues, we need to do more. Yeah.
And also on that note too, I remember I saw an educator I follow on Twitter today who does a lot of professional development around this, and is a Black woman, and she said she had run into cases where people were actually getting certificates in anti-racism, which is, what does that mean? I know Sara and I follow the same people.
Yeah, I saw.
I'm like, you don't really get a certificate and then say, okay, now I'm an anti-racist. Like, this is gonna be my whole life. Like, I mean, I'm gonna be learning forever as as myself and as a teacher. I can put her name in the chat. I see that question. She's a real Kelly Wickham Hurst, I believe.
Yes.
But I don't know her hand, but I need to look up her handle. I can put that in there.
And I was looking too on that same comment. I was looking. I get sucked into comments, which has its pros and cons. But with that post that she made, I did see in the comments that someone was like, yes, and that's awful, and like people developing curriculums around this, like that's not the right thing. But also, what does it say that we need points, like as teachers, to get recertified? Like, again, pros and cons to that, but how could that be kind of retooled so that we're not trying to get points for and certificates for taking an anti-racist PD or whatever? So like, it's more than just, you know, bringing books into our classroom and talking about the issues. It's really, as we all are aware, like systemic. I mean, how do we change everything to work better for everyone, as opposed to those of us who have the time and, you know, the resources to do that stuff?
For me, it really comes, like, if we think about putting the kids first or students first, if we're in this for the right reasons, how could we possibly ignore what so many of our students are facing on a day-to-day basis? Yeah. Like I've, during the whole quarantine, nobody close to me has gotten, I'm very privileged. And one of my students wrote on a discussion that he had seen in his neighborhood. He lives in an apartment building. I'm assuming there's other apartment buildings around. He has seen neighbors get taken away by the ambulance and not known, did they come home from the hospital? And I was just, like, that is a completely different experience than I have had. And he's going through that because he's Hispanic and he's low income, and that's what's happening in his neighborhood. And so to me, it's like, and that's what bothers me so much, I guess, about teachers and administration ignoring these things. Is it's like, if you're really trying to do what's best for your kids, like you're just, I mean, you're committing a crime to like not care about what they're facing every day and to try to make it better.
Yeah, no, Mary, I think I definitely agree with that. I know it's 6:03 and I want to respect everyone's time. I know these are conversations that don't end, as we already said, and it's going to keep happening and happening with our colleagues across the country, I hope. But I'm really, really grateful to all of you for coming. And thank you for those of you who came and contributed to the chat, challenged us with good questions. And, you know, I urge us to keep up the fight, and I think we'll be successful. And yeah, I know there's a lot of resources in the chat, and this will all be available, I think, through the Classroom Culture website and their Instagram handles. So thank you guys so much. Really appreciate it. Please keep pushing us too.